But the game is simple. We have to own assets. We've got to own them for a decade. And then we have options. Stop increasing
Yeah.
your spending as you get raises. Stop thinking you deserve something. Stop all of this. The rat race is killing people, but
Yeah.
every rat in the race is choosing to be there. Until you stop running and own your choices, it's on you, not the government. Alrighty, folks, we're going to give you a little taste of the amazing things that are available inside the school community called One Rental at a Time. Not only do we have a lot of free education, boot camps, creative financing, economics, all of these amazing things, but we also give you weekly opportunities to interact with my millionaire Rolodex. And today's opportunity is with the one and only Anna Marii mom, Kelly. Anna, how you doing?
I am great. It's so good to be here, and I love that we get to open it up to questions. So hopefully we can be helpful to y'all today.
Absolutely, folks. Again, just for the recording, what happens inside school is you can raise your hands. I will call on you, or you can leave comments below and I will read them. But Anna and I will riff on two topics real quick. Anna, you have a choice. We can talk about Grant Cardone and Elizabeth Warren, or we can talk about the new retirement age. Which one of those do you want to go to first? Because they both are interesting.
They are. How about the new retirement age?
All right. So I read a report this morning that frankly made me sick. And it's basically highlighting that no longer can the middle class plan on retiring at 65. They now must plan till 75. The essence of the story is we are living longer and our money is not lasting. When I read this report, my heart sank. It is my new stated goal that I'm finally comfortable talking about is in growing the middle class. I think you and I have both come from very humble beginnings and proved what was possible. I think it starts with buying assets and holding them for a decade. But yeah, the new retirement age is not 65 on it, it's 75, and I'm sick to my stomach. How does that feel? How does that hit you?
Yeah, I've thought about this a lot as I've thought about the realities of our national debt and whether there's any hope for that to get better because a government growing in debt is not good, especially when it can't fund its promises or its liabilities. So, I watched not too long ago, everything seems like the other day to me. It's probably been a couple months ago where I was watching actually C-SPAN, and there was a discussion in Congress in I think it might have been the Congressional Budget Office, and they were talking about the realities of their debt and their need to put bygones aside, put politics aside, and work together to fix this issue. And the biggest thing that was kind of a shock to me. I mean, I knew it on the perimeter as we all do. We all hear the government's not going to be able to fund Social Security and Medicare at some point, and we've got to make changes. And so that becomes a political headline. The Republicans want to take away your Social Security or your Medicare, and the Democrats want to save you from it, but they won't stop spending. That's what the spin is, right? But what I realized the reality was, and I do not remember the exact statistics, so please don't quote me, but I know I'm in the ballpark. They showed pie graphs of the national government and our budget and how much they actually get to fight over with their politicizing and their pet
The variable
projects.
is really small. Yeah.
It's really small. It's only about 8%. 8% of the budget is all that they actually get to fight over. And the
Mm.
reason for that, that's its current state this year, is because one, the national debt interest that we're paying is huge. It's surpassed what we spend on military and Social Security, right? So it's big. But we have national debt, military, Social Security, Medicare, and then a few other, infrastructure and programs. But what they said was in just 5 years, if we do not do something different, we will have not enough tax dollars coming in to pay for Social Security and Medicare. So that's the reality. We have 5 years before this becomes a real problem, and the government simply can't fund it without printing more money and going into more debt, which causes inflation, right? So the reality of that hit me. And when I realized how little room they have in the budget, it made me have to think my views on taxes, my views on immigration, my views on all kinds of things that I'm for and somebody on the other side might be against, really are skewed because they don't take into account the reality of how little money the government has to play with versus what's coming. And so in 5 years, we have, I don't remember the number, but it's millions more baby boomers retiring that are hitting that retirement age. And we will not have enough people working and taxing to fund it. So the realities become it's very, very difficult, and they've got to make some very difficult choices. And those choices really come down to you've got to figure out a way to tax people more. You've got to get rid of the only like 8% or so that they have to play with, which is very, very little and really doesn't solve the problem, even if they agreed bipartisan on all those other issues. Or you've got to bring in more people because we're not having enough babies to pay for, to work, to spend, and pay taxes to cover what's coming due in those unfunded liabilities in 5 years. So that's why they've allowed 6 million immigrants into the country over the last 2 years. They don't talk about that. They just ignore it. On the left and on the right, they're saying you're letting all these people in. It's why they're letting them in so that they can work, so that hopefully they can come up with some way to tax them and pay for it. Because we are only having, and then I'll let you talk because I know this is long-winded, but Americans are now only having 1.64 children per woman. And you need 2.1 children per woman in any country generally to sustain the economy to be able to pay for the unfunded liabilities and those that are older. So we are having a problem where more women are just not getting married. They're waiting longer. They're having abortions. They're choosing different lifestyles. Whatever their reasons are, we're not having enough kids. And so the first part is bring in more people, tax people more. The second part is in the future, you've got to pay out less. And what they also said that I think is really important to this conversation is that when Social Security and Medicare were put into existence, they set the retirement age at 65 because the average lifespan was somewhere around age 73. And I might have that just slightly off, but it was about 8 years that they expected to pay out retirement benefits and medical benefits. Now we're living a decade beyond that. And so they're finding that you're having to fund 18, 28 years longer, not quite 28, but 18 to 20, for the most part, getting people, close to 85 instead of 8 years. So they under budgeted how much everybody had to pay into Social Security and Medicare all these years because they underestimated by half by many, measures how much they'd have to pay out. So it's a real problem that we have to fix. It has to be done bipartisanly. And I think, unfortunately, the reality is going to be, at least for people that are not yet at that retirement age, they're going to probably pass legislation because they have to extend the retirement age. My guess would be up to 75. Now, we've seen that happen in the UK, and I watched a really interesting documentary of how it devastated people in the UK, especially those that were almost there, and then they took it away from them. They said, you got to wait 10 more years. So, we're usually behind the UK, but the problems are the same, and we're approaching them. So it's very sobering, serious issue with not a lot of good solutions.
Yeah, well, I think all that's crap, frankly. I think it was Ronald Reagan that said, I'm from the government and I'm here to help. It's kind of like the most dangerous sentence ever
Oh,
spoken by man.
sure.
Uh,
Sure.
I think we all need to step back and stop hoping the government's going to bail us out. I think we all need to step back and realize that there's a book called Extreme Ownership. It's one of my top 10
Sure.
favorite books. We need to own our stuff. I'm Generation X like you, and we were told at a very young age that we were funding Social Security and we were never going to get it right. I remember those conversations.
You're
We just need
older
to,
than me.
yeah, ha
I'm just
ha, yeah,
teasing. I'm just teasing. I don't remember those conversations, but
yeah.
but
I
I
am. I
agree.
do.
I
I'm a couple
believe
of
you.
years older. No, I am a couple of years older. Um, but the point of this is, I don't want anybody who follows one rental at a time to think the government's going to save them. I don't give a rat's ass if they do this or do that. we in our community need to say, okay, I need to take care of myself and my family. That is my
Yeah.
circle. That is my bubble. What can I do? So, hey, if they come through and they give me some cash, great. If they don't, who cares? That's what I want us to think about. And the reason I love your story is because you grew up in Section 8 housing. You busted your butt. You got a great job. You end up buying the big house. You're living the dream. And then you realize this is the rat race. We're in it, right? If we continue
Mhm.
to do this, I know how this party ends, right? Working 40 hours for 40 years to live on 40%. So you made a very important choice, sacrifice, something that very few people could do is you took a step back. You sold the big house and lived with family. That can't be fun. And
With 2
then
babies.
with 2 babies, and then you buy a fourplex in Pennsylvania where it snows and you live on the upstairs with 2 babies. This is extreme ownership. This is
Yes.
living below your means. This is doing the work. This is the first 5 years suck. Let's own assets for a decade. And then you have options. That's what I want people to realize. When I saw this article about living to 75, I wasn't even thinking about Social Security. I was like, folks, let's go own some assets. Let's make sure they cash flow day one. And folks, I don't care if it's a small business, ETFs, stocks, do you, but the game is simple. We have to own assets. We've got to own them for a decade. And then we have options. Stop increasing
Yeah.
your spending as you get raises. Stop thinking you deserve something. Stop all of this. The rat race is killing people, but
Yeah.
every rat in the race is choosing to be there. Until you stop running and own your choices, it's on you, not the government. All right, I'll
Yeah.
stop my rant.
No, no, no. I appreciate your rant. I do think, I mean, I agree with you 100%. I really do. In terms of that's our personal solution, right? When you get down to brass tacks and you say, what does that mean for me? Yes, the answer is the government's not going to save us. The government, in my opinion, has gotten too big. And anytime they take over a program, they screw it up, right? They
Absolutely.
underestimate or whatever. So we know that, right? Regardless of your political bent, that's just financially, it's proven over and over and again. The more programs there are, the more the government has to pay, the more they have to take from other people, including those of us that are working, in order to fund it eventually. And I will say, that's my more conservative bent. My more liberal bent is that I did grow up a product of poverty, multi-generational poverty. My mother was a battered woman. I've been in women's shelters. We've been on WIC. We've been on Section 8. I've seen it all, even though my mom very much worked 3 jobs to try to not take advantage of any of those programs. She did what she needed to, but still needed help. And I've worked with inner city youth, kids, and I understand poverty mentality and how people get stuck because, Michael, they have no education to know any other way. They have no network to know any other way. And so I come from that from a compassionate standpoint because I've lived it and I still see it and I still try to pour into people's lives in that regard to teach them financial literacy and that there is hope and that they can get out of it. So one of it's the belief, but I also believe that some of these programs are necessary. What I think is really important about what you said is that I think if we can continue to educate people from a young age, especially those that are living check to check. I mean, 70% of our population ballpark is living check to check today. So we haven't gotten the message through, right? 50% of the population has less than $500 saved in their savings account. 50% of the population is going to end up relying on the government, right? And for some people, we can't change that. But the sad reality is there's many that rely on the government in the early ages, especially the lower class. The middle class is trying to work hard to not have to rely on the government, and they've made some level of independence, but they far too often are taught that their end game is retire at 65, work your butt off, be independent, and then at 65, hopefully you have investments and a 401k so that you're not just relying on Social Security and Medicare. But even those that have investments in 401k, Michael, the goal has been since I was in private banking in 1998, Save 1 million, invest to get 1 million, and you can live on 4%. Well, that's
Ugh,
$40,000.
no thanks.
$40,000 even 20 years ago, I realized as a young adult, that's not very much. I make more than that today as a single person. But today, $40,000, if you have more than one person in your family, can be at poverty level. So we have to make people understand, even investing in the 401k and having some social security and Medicare probably isn't enough for you. So to your point, you have to say, how am I going to take my personal economy today in my hands, but also figure out a better way so that I'm not dependent on any of the social security and Medicare if it came to that point, because the government's not likely to be there to rescue you. So I agree with you completely. I just think it's a very complex situation, and it's part of why you and I are so passionate about educating people on, you buy a couple of rentals, you'll have not only the $1 million in equity, but you'll have significantly more cash flow than living on that 4%. You can live on easily 6 figures every single year in addition to your job today, in
Mhm.
5 years, and when you're 75, 85, 90. And so I'm thankful we found that path. And I agree with you 100%. That's our personal solution, whether
Yeah.
actively or passively. You've got to figure out how to have more money coming in with less and less of your time as you age to be able to take care of yourself no matter what happens in this country.
Totally agree. I mean, the last thing I'll say on this topic, and then we'll go to Elizabeth Warren and Grant Cardone. Again, folks, remember you can raise your hand, you can put comments below. These sessions really are meant for you. Again, I want to bring to you millionaires with different views, different opinions, allow you to interact with them. So again, leave comments, raise hands, do all that good stuff. The last thing I will uh, say on this topic before we go to Elizabeth Warren and Grant Cardone is, if you are with me and you're willing to, kind of stand up and say enough's enough already, everybody's going to be in a different position of life. So I'll say a couple of things that I would own. If I'm early in life and, I'm not making, you know, a significant income, whatever that is for your area, uh, invest in, growing yourself. I mean, my most valuable class, and I have, 6 years of post, high school graduate or education, was a junior college speech and debate, or a speech class. Sorry, not debate, just speech class. Find a way. Maybe now it's editing videos, or maybe it's, AI or whatever. If you're early, right? You're in your 20s and you haven't found your thing yet, um, go find that high paying trait, because there's somebody out there. Second, if you're early, don't poo-poo trades. Being an electrician, a plumber, roofer. There's a lot of folks that are aging out, and we have a huge vacuum of folks not in the trade. So again, realize you don't have to go to college. If you don't have a return on investment of going to college for 4 years and getting 6 figures in debt, don't go, right? The trades are great. Now let's talk for folks midlife. Right? You're maybe like me. You didn't start doing anything until you're in your 30s, maybe 40s. You already have some life events. You already have a child or two or three. You already have student debt. You already have a mortgage payment. Well, I got news for you. You're going to have to make some sacrifices. In Anna's case, she sold the big house. In my case, we got meticulous on cutting our spending. We went from spending 100% to 50%. That was not fun. It's creating discretionary income is not fun. The rat race is not there to have discretionary income. The rat race is there for you to spend everything and credit. That's what we are consumers. We are told to
Yeah.
do that. It'll be uncomfortable. But these are just things. And then lastly, we're trying to create disposable or discretionary income. Those are the seeds that become trees and mountains of wealth in the future. It takes 10 years, but it is so worth it.
Yeah,
All right, Grant.
absolutely. And you have to do both parts. Just to throw this in there, because I know we talk about this, and there's a lot of social media, experts and wealthy people that have their opinions, but some will say you can't ever save enough. You just got to make more money. And the reality is it takes both. You have to both figure out a way to make more and figure out a way to spend less. And if you're making more, but you don't get disciplined and living below your means, you're always going to want more and bring your level of lifestyle up to your income. It's what we see. It's why 70% of the population, even if they're making plus $250,000 a year, are still living check to check. You have to live below your means while you work to expand your means. And if you always have that mindset, I still have that mindset. I still choose to live below my means, spend on what is really going to bring me joy and memories and impact, and then save on other things that, really would be easy to spend double the money on without much benefit. So constantly live below your means, work to expand your means. And that's how you're going to create wealth and keep wealth and sustain it over time.
All right, we're going to do one more topic just to shout out Brandon. He has his hands up. He will be the first question we go to after we talk about Grant Cardone and Elizabeth Warren. Anna, I know this. I'm going to trust you know this. I would say that Elizabeth Warren and Grant Cardone are on opposite sides of the political spectrum. I don't think that's unheard of, right? Would that be fair to say?
Probably.
There's no probably. They are. But anyways, I like how you hedge that.
I don't know
Thank
enough. I don't follow Grant that much. I know who Grant is, obviously, and
Trust
there's
me,
some things
he's
he
on that
says that
side.
I like, but I really don't listen to him, too much beyond, you all got to make a lot of more money, and let me show you how to do it.
I got you. Well, then, so I do follow him. So he is as right as Elizabeth Warren is left. I think that is
Okay, good to
reasonable.
know.
So they're
Yeah.
opposite. But I had to check outside and see if pigs were flying. I tried to see if hell was frozen over because Elizabeth Warren and Grant Cardone agree on something.
Wow.
They both agree. Let me say this. They both agree on something and they agree on it for the same reason. Sometimes you can agree on something, but you come at it from different directions. They both agree on something and for the same reasons, which I'll give you. They both are calling for the Fed, Jerome Powell, to cut 75 basis points tomorrow. This is what
Wow.
I got from Grant. Elizabeth Warren wrote a letter, essentially had the same things. Every indicator in the US is negative: jobs, wages, shipping, oil, mortgage, applications, housing starts, delinquencies, credit card. Everything is breaking. The economy is crumbling. Both Elizabeth Warren, Grant Cardone have called for a 75 basis point, but I know you personally have been leaning towards a bigger event coming in the economy where I'm more the rolling recession. What do you think, Anna? 75 basis points possible? What do you think?
Possible, highly improbable. Um, you know, Again, just to clarify, you and I've talked about this quite a bit. My base case is more of a stagflationary environment and a recession. Potentially, we are in a silent recession. We are in rolling recession. I think we're going to have a technical recession and it's going to get worse, but there's things that could keep that from happening, like more government spending to prop up jobs and barely prop up GDP so they don't have to say that we're in a recession, right? There's also things that could make it deeply recessionary, such as a banking failure. So with that said, I think that the risk is much more on the economy is in trouble side than it is that we have a lot more inflation in the short term, in the cycle. Again, you and I've talked about, and it's really important to understand, there's a difference in cyclical time period and secular financial trends. So cyclical is what's going to happen in the next several months. Secular is longer term. So in the short term, there's much more risk. As I've been saying, I believe we're in a recession. It just hasn't been called, that the economy is going to rapidly decelerate if we don't cut rates. So I really think they should cut 50. I'm not at 75 though, because there are still sectors of the economy that are inflationary. And if the government continues to spend, and they will, as soon as we're in a recession, they will pump the helicopter money. Congress will give money. They'll give all kinds of assistance. The Fed will cut rates again. And that's going to increase the national debt, which is going to cause treasury rates to go up. And it's going to cause more inflation as they pump money into the system. The Fed also knows that as soon as they cut rates, the markets are initially going to rally. It's going to be great news. Then it's going to be the realization, if history repeats itself, and it usually does, after the Fed cuts rates, they're going to realize the Fed monetary policy is supposed to be a leading indicator. And if they cut too much, it's a warning. Whoa, recession is here. It's on the horizon. Things are getting bad. And that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Corporations start to, cut jobs, unemployment rises. And again, that rapidly brings that on. However, there's a lot of money in the sidelines this time, Michael, and all that money on the sidelines can pump the system with money. And both of those things, whether it's money on the sidelines, pumping the system with money, or whether it's, home equity being tapped, as you mentioned last week, pumping the system worth of money, inflation could come right back up and we could have a double rise in inflation, just as has happened historically. So the Fed does not look at it only one way. They still say inflation could come back depending on how everybody reacts or if we have a recession. And therefore, I don't think they want to create one panic by going 75 basis points. Some people think they'll create panic at the 50 basis point cut. And there was an uptick again last month in certain sectors of inflation that they look closely at. Core and PCE. So I think they're going to try to be cautious. If they cut 50, they're going to say, we're not worried about a recession, just like they have. And they're going to try to calm those fears and that self-fulfilling prophecy and say, 50 is too tight. We want to go back to more neutral. We feel like 50 is neutral. Or they cut 25 and say, we saw some inflation. We're going to do it slowly. There's more rate cuts coming. But I think pigs would be flying, to your point, if they cut 75 bips. So I'm going to disagree with both of them and show my moderate conservative bent that I think they should go 50, but they'll still probably go 25.
Yeah, this is what I've told folks. And this is actually the first Fed meeting in years where I actually don't have an opinion. I actually don't know what the Fed's going to do, but I do have an opinion on what happens based on the cut. So let me tell you this. So I think if they cut 25, they're concerned about the US economy. I think if they cut 50, they're afraid of the US economy. And just because we got this yesterday, if they cut 75, my answer is watch out below, something is breaking. So that's how I kind of categorize it. I have no idea what they're going to do. I could see logic for both starting big, declaring this. I don't know. So to me, it's concerned, afraid, watch out. That's how I categorize it.
They don't want to telegraph that, but that is what they're thinking if they do. So absolutely 100%.
Very, very cool. All right, folks, it is time for questions and comments. We have 2 hands raised. Again, you can go to the reaction button. There's a little tab there that says raise your hand. Just go there. Brandon, you're up first, buddy. What do you got?
One of the questions I have is wondering if the Fed is trying to condition us for a higher inflation rate based off of the national debt. Because we know inflation shrinks that dollar impact. What we're also coming across, and we've lived all of our lives, all of us Gen X, they sold us 401k as the solution, and we're seeing it's not. This community is saying, government, you're not the solution. I'm going to take control of my own destiny. We know that, and I agree, assets create wealth and give us security. Unfortunately, the government, both in property tax and in income tax, are trying to strip our equity from us. Where's the biggest source? It's the general public. So they're trying to figure out how to strip our equity from us for their own spending habits. They want us to continue to consume, not by assets. They want us to consume. Every time they send a stimulus check, they talk about it. Buy TVs, buy hot tubs, buy whatever. They're not saying, hey, invest it in the long term. They're wanting us to consume so they can strip that equity from us.
Yeah. So I think there's a couple of tidbits there. Let's go to the inflation one first. This is a conversation I've had with a couple of folks, Anna. I think Jerome Powell has been remarkably clear. They're not going to rest until the inflation rate's 2%, an average 2%. I don't know if you go to what is it called? Inflation Now or whatever that is. Inflation Now. Yeah, Trueflation. Thank you. It's actually 1.5 or something crazy already.
1.06 as of last Friday. 1.06.
Yeah. So I think the Fed's going to declare victory pretty soon on that front. But I think Brandon brings up a great point. Do you think the Fed over the next, let's call it 3 to 5 years, could take this notion of 2% and gradually move it to 2.5 or 3. Because once again, one of the ways to make the debt go away, to Brandon's point, is absolutely inflation's a feature, not a bug, as I've said for years now. What do you think of that first?
Yeah, this is so complex. It really is, because there's things that the Fed controls and there's things that the Fed has absolutely no control over. And, they try to say whatever the government gives us, whatever happens in fiscal policy, this is the implications of what it could deal with in the future. But our role as the Fed is just, try to keep unemployment at a reasonable level, GDP and inflation at a reasonable level. And essentially, they have no control over what Congress does. Both sides, both Republican and Democrat, when it comes to fiscal policy, have our national debt growing significantly over the next decade. So I'm sorry whether you're, pro-Trump or pro-Harris, pro-left or pro-right, the government is not going to fix the fiscal cliff and the reality that they're going to continue to spend. If they continue to spend, they must continue to tax. There's conflicting issues though here. One is, if they grow the national debt, governments only have 3 ways to get out of it historically, if they have the world reserve currency, which we do at this point. One is austerity. You must cut programs. You must cut expenses. You have to cut back on what you will fund. The second, and that is not politically expedient on either side, so they won't do it. And maybe after the election, they will to some extent. That's what we talked about in the first question. Austerity would be changing Social Security and Medicare, for example. Number 2 is tax people more. In order to tax people more, though, you've got to get people to spend more and for their asset values to go up. We haven't seen it historically, but there's been a lot of legislation push that has failed, but could become more bipartisan, to not only raise your capital gain, that's one way to do it, but more recently, basically tax unrealized capital gains. Let's look at what your property values are worth today, what your 401k and your stocks are worth today, even if you haven't sold them, and let's tax you on that. That's a real a real new thing that definitely has me worried if it goes through. But the reality is they're going to continue to pump more money. They got to cut spending. And if they can't raise the tax base, the only other option governments have is to allow more inflation without telling you that. Because if they can pay down their current debt with dollars in the future that are worth less, which make their debt worth cheaper to pay off in today's dollars, then that's what they're going to do. But they're not going to tell you that. So they have to do it without telling you that's what they're doing. And that's why I say, although my base case is rates fall for what the Fed can control, they can control the Fed funds rate and how easy and cheap it is for us to borrow. Then the US government fiscal policy controls how much helicopter money goes in. But all of it is inflationary. At the same time, our secular long-term trends are deflationary. We cannot create enough growth if we continue on this 40-year secular decline. We cannot create high enough GDP to get people to have higher standards of living, to make enough money to tax you. And that is deflationary. So that's fighting the opposite inflationary forces. And that's why I really believe we're going to have stagflation, a very low growth economy, because we don't have enough people spending. There's not enough people to tax. Eventually, the tax dollars still are not enough. Even if you taxed 100% all the billionaires, it's still not enough to pay our unfunded liabilities in 5 years. So what is the solution? The Fed's hands are tied. And I will tell you, I've read the FOMC meeting minutes. I've read the Congressional Budget Office minutes. They expect that over the next 10 years to 2034, GDP will have a growth rate of about 1.8 to 2%. So if GDP is only going to grow 1.8 to 2%, and that needs immigration, they're relying on immigration to make that happen. So they will allow more immigration. That's why they cannot afford to have, the Fed can't afford for inflation to be any higher than 2. That's why they're stuck on this. We must get back to the 2%. If the Fed had it their way, 2% inflation, 2% growth is a flat economy without big asset values. But the government, Congress, they don't understand policy. They don't understand economics. They make bozo decisions. And I don't think that they're going to let the Fed win because of the national debt. Hal doesn't like it. He's warned the bigger issue is the national debt. But I think we are in for lower growth, higher inflation, and that is not good. That's a decade of stagflation, in my opinion. I hope I'm wrong, but that's what history shows us happens when countries get in the type of debt that we're in today.
Yeah, I mean, Jamie Dimon just said it. I think it was over the weekend that stagflation is the worst case scenario. We'll talk about that in a minute. I want to get up to the next person who raised their hand, and it's Felix. Felix, my man, what do you got?
Hey, Michael and Anna, thank you. Anna, thank you specifically about the story about staying with your kids in the fourplex, because I actually just walked through one 2 or 3 days ago thinking of the same thing. And sorry, my question is not, it doesn't apply to everyone. It's really just me. Michael, saving that discretionary income, about 66% I'm putting towards getting the next door. I've got one under my belt now. And about 33% I'm putting in the stock market. My question is would you recommend, all of those assets? I'm maxing out my 401k. I'm going to do that. Cool. I'm not including that.
Match. You have a match.
Yeah,
okay.
I do. But even on top of that, I'm putting some of my discretionary income in a separate individual brokerage account. Like, sure. Would you just, put all of those assets towards door number 2 and just focus on that, or play like the more patient route? So that's
actually, Anna and I will both answer this question because I think we're going to go different. I was raised a gentleman, so I'll go ladies first. Anna?
Thank you. I would say this, and I'm again, we probably don't need to say this, but this is not financial advice, Felix. I no longer have any securities licenses, and so I'm not allowed to tell you what to do with your stock money. But in my opinion, what I did that worked well for me and what I believe is a wise thing to consider, I contributed enough to my 401k just to get my company match, because that was 100% return on my money, right? Then I decided I'm not going to get greedy with it, and I'm not going to wait for the stock market to have more ups and downs. Now, to be fair, I was wiped out about 2/3 of my 401k in the GFC because I was so heavily invested in stocks. I see a lot of similarities today with where we were in 2007. It's different this time. It's fine. It's only mortgages. It's not going to hit financial assets, right? And I was a fool, and I lost a lot of money for doing that. I think that history shows us that in times of the market like today, where we are on the cusp of a big shift from an expansion to a contraction of some sort, the stock market does not do well during that contraction. Now, we've kind of defied the odds. They always say it's different this time because the stock market always rallies and asset values always go up before that shift, and then they start to fall. The bubble starts to pop. So personally, I think there's too much risk there, comparative risk in the stock market versus owning residential housing, which people always need. History shows us that in good times and bad, if you have good properties and you're providing good, safe housing in areas that have good schools and low crime, you will have your units almost full. People will prioritize paying their rent because they want to stay safe and secure for their families. So for me, if I were giving you advice, I would say max out your 401 match. Don't put anything else in the market. Whatever you have that's in the market today, maybe start taking some of your gains. You might be early, but I think we're close to there. And you might keep whatever in that market you can afford to hold a long term. But if you have gains that you can take and you can put it into buying another door more quickly, that's going to be much more resilient and probably produce better returns over the next decade for you than the stock market will if we have a flat economy or a contracting economy, even a recovering economy. And generally, Felix, a recession's 10 months average. Recovery's 2 to 3 years. So it's going to take you, if you put more money in the market today and you get big declines, it could take you well beyond those 3 years just to get back to normal. But history shows us that it'll probably take several years beyond that. The number of properties you could buy by taking that money now and using it as down payments on multiple doors to create real cash flow, to me, it's a no-brainer, but I'm negative the market. I've lived through too many of these cycles where I see what happens if you got a bunch of extra money. Now I'll be going in when the markets fall because I'm already at an area where my wealth and my income is at levels that I've got enough money that I can say, okay, now I'm going to throw this in risk and let that grow over the long term. But if your financial goals are more income and slow growth, I'd put less in the market and I'd put more into more quickly buying your next property.
Yeah. So again, it's really funny, Felix. If you know my story, right? I was a huge stock guy, turned 7 into 200 only to lose it all. So I didn't touch the stock market for 15 years. Again, not financial advice. But to me, the real question is, hey, I'm just going to use some numbers just to make this interesting. Hey, I'm putting away $2,000 a month. I'm just making that up. When you say 33 and 66, that means that roughly $600 is going to the market, 1,400 is going to savings. And what I'm hearing you say in your question, Felix, is all $2,000 of that is eventually going to be the down payment for the next asset. That's what I hear you say. When I think about that split, first off, pretty conservative. I guess the biggest question to me when I think about this is you kind of played out the what if scenario, right? How long do I expect before I have enough capital to buy the next asset? That's the question I'm asking myself with your question. If the answer is, hey, I expect to have enough down payment in the next 6 months, maybe 9 months or less, again, personally, I wouldn't have a dollar in the stock market. I have no idea where we're going in the short term. If you're telling me, hey, it's going to be 2 or 3 years, at some point, to Anna's point, the market, if you look at the graph, it's up and to the right. So to me, it's a duration question, right? If you said 10 years, I'd be like, yeah, go ahead, put 30% in the stock market, right? Over 10 years, I think if you look historically over 10 years, there's not many years where you're down 10 years. So I think the biggest question, Felix, I would ask is how soon do you think you'll be ready for a down payment? And in my opinion, 9 months or less, I wouldn't want the risk of the stock market. Get 4 or 5% in a money market or a CD or something. Because again, a lot of people we're at all-time highs or near them. Jamie Dimon's talking about a lost decade. It feels really risky to me. Does that make sense, Felix?
Yeah, it does. And the numbers that you used were kind of spot on. Actually.
Like I've done this before.
The only thing just to add to that, Michael, because I think you make some really good points. If we're always sold, and trust me, I was in private banking. I told my clients this, right? Over the long term, the S&P is going to do 8 or 9%. Now that's not adjusted by taxes. So you got to, reduce that in your fees. You might get 5, right? What's really in your pocket. That's if the market continues to do well. But if you buy and sell at the wrong time, or those PEs are wiped out and you have a bubble collapse, for your personal return isn't going to be that long-term decades return. We've seen, and there's a saying, pigs get fat, hogs get slaughtered, right? And so I just learned I'm not going to get greedy in a time in history that shows there's going to be more volatility where PE ratios right now, the market cap of the stock market is 200% of GDP. Before the GFC and the Great Depression, it was 108%. So our PE ratios, what people are paying for stock, are significantly higher than the bubbles just before major collapses. So I would say this is a time to be conservative with what you put in the market over the short term. Over the long term, when values tank, that's when you go in more into your 401, into indices or into specific stocks. It'll be mutual funds, but in your brokerage account for companies you think have longevity. And that's where you wait for that long-term appreciation. But everything else during that time should be going to things to create income and preservation. And the reality is, and Michael and I are living proof of this, is when people are comparing, well, real estate's only returning 5, that's people that pay retail for a brand new house and hold it and have no leverage, right? But the reality is I can beat stock market returns, and I have all day long buying real estate at the bottom with leverage, locking in low rates, and having not only cash flow, but appreciation, tax benefits, and principal pay down. All 4 of those things together in my opinion, will beat the average S&P, and I can prove that all day long if you buy right. So I just think real estate is a significantly superior asset that allows me not only the growth in the future that we're hoping for in the stock market, but the income and the preservation. It meets all three of your lifetime financial goals: income, growth, and preservation.
Very, very cool. Felix, we're good. Yeah. Very cool. All right. Leah, you up next. You got your hand up. Is she there? Let's see if I can unmute her. Let's see. Ask to unmute.
Hi, sorry.
There
I
she
couldn't find
is.
the
How you
unmute
doing?
button. Good. Thank you. And yes, it actually is Leah, so good job.
Ah, I got it right the first time.
Yeah. I was curious, Anna, because my situation is I'm trying to kind of do what you did. So we bought our primary home in like late March of 2023, and we bought it new construction. And it was our dream home. And then we discovered real estate investing and house hacking. So our plan is to sell it and house hack. But it's because it's in a like above the median higher price point. It's in a very slow moving group right now. So we have it listed, but we got like one lower offer, but then things have been kind of slow. So our kind of plan right now is to relist in the spring and hope it gets a little bit more, at least, you know, what we paid for it or a little more is what we would hope. But I'm just kind of curious your thoughts on like balancing, you know, buying and, you know, wanting to take advantage of the buyer's market, but also having to be a seller and like knowing we're going to end up losing some sort of money because we had to put, you know, appliances and all that good stuff into the house. And just kind of balancing those two.
Leah, what is your interest rate and your payment right now?
It is our interest rate is 6.375. And so our payment is $36.33, so $3,633. And then we do have an HOA, which is why we can't like house hack in our current.
Sure. Okay. And in your area or wherever you're looking to move, are there properties that are, you know, triplex quads that you could find that you could live in to lower your cost of living?
Yes, like they're kind of like duplexes are kind of on the more expensive side now in our market, but like if you know, assuming we lived in one side and then rented the other, like our housing payment would be less than our current housing payment. And the other, so we're thinking of either doing that or the zoning laws have changed in our city. So if we buy it in our actual city, we can add in ADUs now. So our other thought is to buy like a less expensive primary home, but eventually we could also rent out if we moved away and then build an ADU or duplex ADU in the back.
Yeah, great. And the reason I'm asking for that, I'm asking you that is that the cost of many duplexes have gone up so much that even if you lived in one side, you might not have enough coming in from that other side on a cash flow basis to make a big difference in your payment, but you might, you know, and so what you've got to ask yourself is a couple of things. You know, one is how much can I cut in my living expenses? It goes back to, you know, the question number one, you got to live below your means. How much can you cut in your living expenses if you were to move into a duplex, right? And we'll just say duplex for now because that's what you mentioned. And likely you're going to be able to get a better interest rate owner occupied on that new duplex than what you are in your house. And likely you're going to be able to save some money. However, you're also talking about selling your home at a loss. And we don't really know what's going to happen with prices. It's very much dependent on the market you're in and the supply and demand of the type of house you're trying to sell in that particular market at that particular time. But if you're going to lose more money selling that house than what you're going to save by house hacking, then you might not, house hacking at this time might not actually be the wisest thing for you to do. Instead, similar to house hacking, you could stay in your house, refinance it when rates fall as they're going to, and then take that savings from that refi to buy that new, that new duplex that's going to bring you in some cash flow, that the cash flow from that duplex also dumped onto your mortgage payment reduces your cost of living. So you can either house hack or stay where you are, get the cost down, buy another property, and it will have a very similar result without you feeling like you're stuck until you can sell that house. And we actually kind of did that. I mean, we house hacked in the 4-unit first, and when we relocated after living with my family for a year, but then we outgrew that, and that's the other thing, is the reality of your family size. We went from 2 of us and 2 kids in a 2-bedroom and a little office to 2 of us and pregnant with a 3rd baby. And so we decided to rent a house instead of buy. So we rented a really nice house, much cheaper than I could have bought it for. And then now I had 4 units generating income that helped pay down my rent on my house. But it allowed us to have a nicer home, but use the rental income from the other properties to reduce our expenses in the same way that it did while we house hacked. And then we stayed in that rental property for several years while we continued to buy more real estate to bring in more income. So there's lots of ways to skin the proverbial cat. You just want to make sure that you're not losing money when you move. That's going to make it kind of negate the benefits of that house hack.
Leah, when I think about your situation, and again, what I put out daily on the daily financial news, I frankly fully support it, right? I think we're in a buyer's market here through springtime. I wouldn't want, and that means I wouldn't want to be a seller. I wouldn't want to be a seller
Not yet.
of an asset right now. It's just too slow. Buyers are pulling back, certainly above the median, as you highlighted. I think sitting back, staying where you are, seeing where we get to February, March is okay. But also that's not permission to do nothing. I mean, I'm a big believer in, you still got to learn the market. You still got to go kick rocks. You talked about building an ADU. You should be spending the next 4 or 5 months getting better, getting more educated, right? Does your city have approved plans? What's the cost per square foot? What does the lot have to look like to have an ADU? The other thing I think about, and again, I don't know your situation at all, but again, something else I think about is, you know what? Maybe there's a roommate, maybe there's a family friend, a cousin, or somebody that I know, trust, and respect that I wouldn't mind putting in that 4th bedroom or whatnot, just to add a little bit. There's lots of things you could do to make this next 4 to 5 months a little bit better. But as far as your timing goes, I fully support that. Does that make sense?
Yes. Thank you so much.
Of course. Well, we got time for one more question, Anna. I do have a hard stop at 9 o'clock, as you know, so we'll go to I'm going to say Vianney's question, and hopefully get this in 5 minutes or so. There she is. Hi. Oh, where'd she go? We can hear you. Oh, there she is.
Can you hear me?
I can. How are you?
Okay. Hi, everybody. So thank you so much for what you guys are doing. Let me turn on the light here. Sorry, I'm at the office. So my question is that I think when I started with real estate, same as all of you guys, I didn't know anything, and I still feel like I don't know anything. Well, I know a lot, but not as much as I would like. So my problem is that I bought a property in California, and then that property, unfortunately, the renters that was within COVID, the renters didn't pay rent for like a year and something. After I got the tenants out, I was finally ready to sell it because I was just too traumatized. I was like, I don't want to owe anything in California. Well, not in California, but in LA County.
Oh, LA County. Ouch.
It was LA County. So I couldn't do anything about it. They didn't pay rent for a year and a half. So I had to pay my house mortgage, right? I had kids. I was working, and I was trying to see how can I figure it out and pay the rent all those months. At the end, I ended up selling it. I bought 2 houses in Bakersfield. And so I thought everything was going to be okay. Everything has been okay until this year that I got a letter saying that my taxes went up. And now I'm negative, right? They said that there was a glitch in the computer, and I was paying taxes based on the taxes of the previous owner. So they redid the taxes, and now I'm actually negative on this property. So I'm thinking, what am I going to do now? If I sell the property, I'm not going to make any money. I'm actually going to end up losing money because right now the houses are staying a little bit longer, people are negotiating prices and so on. But if I stay, I have to carry the negative sign, which that's not what I wanted to do, because I purchased the house because that was positive.
Yeah.
So what do you guys recommend in those situations?
Yeah. So this is kind of my Norris Drive story, just with different variables, but it happens to all of us in the beginning, right? In your case, it sounds like when you bought it, the Bakersfield tax assessment didn't reassess at purchase. That is absolutely totally legal. That's what they're supposed to do, right? They're supposed to come in and say, hey, you bought that was a transaction. We're going to come and reassess it. The good news is Prop 13 allows it. It won't be that big jump in the future. So like Norris Drive, I unfortunately had a negative cash flow, again, what I call an alligator, for about 2.5 years. Once you're in it, you got to learn the lesson. You got to, next time realize that property taxes will be reassessed at purchase price. You've got to find ways to kind of staunch the bleeding. Can you do the binder strategy like Dion talks about, and maybe you're below market? Maybe there's a way you could try to shave expenses. Maybe you can increase your deductible on insurance, because at this point you're trying to find those couple of $100 that makes it better. So if you take your deductible on your insurance from $2,500 to $5,000, maybe there's some savings. Take it to $10,000, maybe there's some savings. Maybe there's some way you can increase rent. Maybe add laundry, right? Maybe add some coin-op laundry machine. You've just gotta get creative. Maybe with rates coming in, you'll get bailed out, and we could do a refi in 6 months or so. But once you're in it, you got to learn the lesson and then look for the edges. I'm sorry. Does that make sense?
I agree 100%.
Thank you. What do you guys recommend for us to learn how to know exactly how our taxes
so in California,
yeah.
So in California, you can just go, you can actually just Google California property taxes. There is a ratio or a formula. I don't remember it off the top of my head. You can also go to title, because basically there's two values. There's the building and the land. I'm going to give you rough numbers. I think land value in most of California, I don't know Bakersfield, is about 22% of purchase. And then there's the building. And I think the formula is 1.2%. Maybe it's 1.22. But again, you can Google California property tax, because that's something California got right. It is a formula that we can get pretty close.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So folks, I am sorry. I have a podcast starting in 1 minute that I will almost be late for. You guys are all amazing. This is our school community. Anna was our millionaire guest this week. Tomorrow, you are in for a treat. You've got Matt and Dion at 8 o'clock. And then on Sunday at 8 a.m., you got this one and only Simon, the uneducated economist. Talk to you guys later. Bye.
Thank you.